Right now, every Eagles fan I talk to is carrying that same mix of anger, disbelief, and stubborn hope after what we watched against the Chargers. And let's be honest, the 2025 season has been a roller coaster, the kind that lifts you up one minute and slams you down the next. Monday Night Football was supposed to be the moment this team planted its foot in the ground and showed who they really are. Instead, it became another chapter in a season defined by frustration, missed opportunities, and those self-inflicted mistakes that make any fan want to drive a fist straight through the couch. 5 turnovers. 5. And even with everything falling apart, the Eagles still showed just enough flashes to torture this fan base, because deep down, it feels like something better is trying to break through the rubble. Before we get started, make sure to hit that like button, because it helps the channel a ton. Now let's get to it, because as maddening as that loss was, you can't look at what happened without seeing pieces, real pieces, of a team that's still capable of getting off the mat. Offensively, for the first time in weeks, you saw new wrinkles, new concepts, actual design in the passing game instead of the static, predictable looks that have suffocated this unit all year. They moved the ball between the 20s. They found ways to create space. They even unleashed Saquon Barkley, who finally ripped off the kind of run everyone in Philadelphia has been waiting for since he put on Midnight Green. That 52-yard shot to the end zone was vintage Saquon, burst, vision, acceleration, and it was only the second time all season he crossed the 100-yard mark. But here's the maddening part. After that, it's like he vanished from the script. The offense drifted back into that pass-heavy, rhythmless attack that keeps putting Jalen Hurts in positions he has never won from. The man has never won a game throwing the ball 40 times or more, and yet here we were again, 40 attempts in a game that begged for balance. And yes, this was the worst game of Jalen Hurts' career. We don't need to sugarcoat it. The mistakes were bad. Some of the reads were rough. But even in the middle of the chaos, he delivered one of the best throws he has ever made, the 3rd and 16 laser to Devonta Smith in overtime. That's the type of throw that only a handful of quarterbacks can even attempt, and he made it with anticipation and confidence. That's why this team drives fans insane. There's always just enough hope mixed in with the mistakes to keep you believing something's still there. Now, if we're talking about the side of the ball that actually did its job, then Vic Fangio's defense deserves every ounce of credit. Even with Jalen Carter unavailable after procedures on both shoulders, the young core showed why this unit still has the backbone of a contender. Jordan Davis played like a man who fully understood the moment. He said it himself. It was on him, Moro Ojomo, Ty Robinson, and the others to rise to the occasion. And Davis didn't just rise, he dominated. A career-high 6 pressures, 2 tackles for loss, 1.5 sacks, 4 hurries, 5 total tackles. That's the performance of a former first-rounder stepping into his responsibility and owning it. Then there's Jix Hunt, whose development has turned into one of the best stories on the entire team. Drafted in the 3rd round out of Houston Baptist, a former safety at Cornell who switched to edge rusher, a player many saw as a long-term project. But he fast-tracked his development with a breakout postseason as a rookie, and now over his last 7 games he stacked 4.5 sacks, 13 quarterback hits, 2 interceptions, a forced fumble, a pass breakup, and even a pick-6 using those old DB instincts. That is the kind of growth championship defenses are built on. And Cooper DeJean put on a clinic in the slot against Ladd McConkey. Every rep looked like something pulled straight from a teaching tape, stride-for-stride coverage, physicality at the break, eyes, and timing to play the football. If you're a defensive coordinator anywhere in the country, you're showing that film to your corners. That's how good he was. But for every positive moment, there was a gut punch. A.J. Brown's 3 drops cost the team dearly, 17 points worth of momentum-shifting mistakes. And once again the offensive line looked like a group trying to hold things together with tape and adrenaline. Landon Dickerson and Cam Jurgens playing at 60 to 70%. Jordan Mailata struggling to find his anchor all year. Lane Johnson's absence glaring as always, with the Eagles dropping to 0-3 without him. The right guard spot remains a revolving door, and that lack of stability is poisoning the rhythm of the entire offense. And as far as the coaching decisions, Kevin Patullo continues to look overwhelmed as a play caller. Nick Sirianni promoting him was supposed to bring clarity and continuity, but instead it feels like deja vu from the Brian Johnson experiment, another internal move that simply hasn't worked. Play calling sequencing has been inconsistent, predictable, and frequently disconnected from what the game demands in real time. It's hard to watch, because when you see the glimpses of creativity, like the one scattered through the Chargers game, it's clear the offense isn't hopeless. It's just stuck between what it wants to be and what it's capable of right now. And yet here's the thing that nobody wants to admit out loud, but every fan feels deep down, even after all the frustration, all the turnovers, all the blown opportunities, it still feels like this thing isn't completely dead. Watching that game, as furious as it made you, Did it not leave you with that weird feeling too? That flicker of belief tucked under the anger? Because the Eagles moved the ball. They found openings. They showed life. And they're not turning it over 5 times every week. If they can clean those mistakes, build on the concepts that actually worked, and let Nick Sirianni continue inserting himself into the offensive design, is it insane to think this team could still flip the script? That's where I'll leave you for now, because the next part of this story is just getting started. Before I continue the second half, tell me this. Do you honestly believe this team can still turn the season around? Or are we watching a sinking ship with no rescue coming? And picking up right from that question, because this is where the season either collapses completely or becomes the kind of turnaround fans talk about for years. When you look at the Chargers game in isolation, it feels like a punch to the stomach. But when you pull back and look at what actually unfolded across those 4 quarters and into overtime, you also see the outline of a team that might finally be inching toward an identity. And if there's one thing the Eagles have been missing all year, it's exactly that, something concrete to build on instead of grasping at flashes that never repeat themselves from week to week. Nick Sirianni's message heading into that game was simple. Play loose, play confident, play free. And for the first time in weeks, you could actually feel that start to seep into the way certain players approached the moment. The defense in particular looked like a unit playing with purpose instead of fear. There was no hesitation, no overthinking, no timid reactions. It was instinctive, aggressive football. It was Jordan Davis deciding that if Jalen Carter wasn't available, he was going to take the weight of the interior defensive line on his shoulders and dominate physically. It was Jix Hunt bringing energy off the edge, flashing the bend, closing speed, and athleticism that made him such a unique hybrid talent. It was Cooper DeJean tightening his technique and showing the kind of poise that veteran corners spend years trying to develop. That side of the ball played with swagger, the kind you need in December when the season hangs by a thread. And then there's the other side, the offense, still clunky, still inconsistent, still trying to figure out who they are. But even there, you can see pieces forming. You can see how certain route concepts actually complemented Jalen Hurts' strengths. You can see the spacing improve in ways that allowed Devonta Smith to operate underneath. You can see Saquon Barkley's explosiveness creating a spark when the blocking gave him room to read and react. And while Hurts' turnovers overshadowed everything else, you can't ignore the fact that when he trusted his feet, trusted his timing, and didn't overthink the middle of the field, he delivered some genuinely elite throws. The challenge now is stacking those moments. That's been the missing ingredient all season, consistency. Every week, the Eagles have had something new holding them back. One game it's the defense giving up big plays. The next it's the offense looking completely lost. The next it's penalties. The next it's turnovers. And this most recent game was the first time it felt like the majority of the issues were self-inflicted rather than structural. That may not sound encouraging, but it actually is. You can fix turnovers. You can fix penalties. You can reestablish balance with Barkley. You can simplify the passing concepts that were working and rep them until they're second nature. What's far harder to fix is a lack of talent or a lack of effort, and this team has neither problem. But let's be honest, the margin for error is gone. Completely gone. The playoff picture makes that crystal clear. The Eagles have put themselves in a position where losing another close game could be the moment the season slips fully out of their hands. They're now fighting not just external opponents but the consequences of their own decisions, their own inconsistencies, and their own inability to close games. And yet the door is still open, not wide, but open, and that's all this team needs if it can rediscover its confidence. The upcoming stretch offers both danger and opportunity. Beat the Raiders and suddenly the playoff odds tick up to 95%. Lose to the Raiders and everything gets complicated in a hurry. Then there's the Commanders matchup looming, a game where Eagles fans will practically take over the stadium. And then the biggest test of all, going into Buffalo with the entire football world assuming Philadelphia is done. That's the kind of stage where great players rewrite narratives and great teams resurrect seasons. You don't need the number 1 seed. You don't need the number 2 seed. You just need a ticket to the dance and enough belief to punch back when it counts. And if the Cowboys stumble even once down the stretch, the division opens right back up. That loss to the Lions already gave the Eagles a lifeline they didn't deserve. And knowing Dallas, there's always a chance they drop a game they shouldn't. They're good, but they're not trustworthy. And that alone keeps this entire race alive. So here's the truth. This Eagles season isn't dead unless the Eagles decide it is. And from everything we've seen, from the fight this defense showed, from the moments of creativity we finally saw on offense, from the way players responded to Sirianni's message, this team hasn't quit. They haven't let go of the rope. And as long as that's the case, there's always a chance. If you're still riding with us, make sure you're subscribed to the channel, hit that like button, and stick around because the video on screen is the perfect next step for diving deeper into what this team needs to do to survive the final stretch of the season. Picking up right from where we left off, because there's still one more layer to peel back in this moment the Eagles are living through. When a season reaches a crossroads like this, everything becomes magnified, the pressure, the criticism, the expectations, and even the hope. And right now, the hope isn't coming from stats or standings or projections. It's coming from flashes on the field that, if they ever align for 4 full quarters, could finally snap this team back into the version of itself fans expected back in week 1. And that's why these next games matter so much, not just because of playoff math, but because of identity. Because every good team hits adversity, but great teams remember how to punch their way out of it. And even though this has been the most frustrating Eagles season in recent memory, you can still feel the heartbeat. You can see it in the way the younger defensive core is stepping up with fearlessness and urgency. You can feel it in the way Nick Sirianni is starting to put his fingerprint back on the offense, even if it's late. You can sense it in the way Jalen Hurts, despite his worst outing of the season, never stopped firing, never stopped fighting, and still stepped into some of the biggest throws of the game when the moment demanded it. And that's what gives this team a chance. They're not broken. They're battered, inconsistent, unpredictable, and frustrating, but they're not broken. And sometimes, the teams that survive seasons like this are the ones that peak at the exact right time, not the ones that coast the whole way through. If the Eagles get the Raiders win, if the offense finally strings together a game that looks complete, if the defense keeps building on what it just showed, then suddenly the story we've been telling all year shifts. Suddenly it's not about collapse, it's about resurgence. Suddenly it's not about disappointment, it's about a team finding itself with the playoffs on the horizon. It all comes down to execution, discipline, and whether this coaching staff can lean into what actually works instead of forcing something that clearly doesn't. Because we've seen the blueprint now. We saw the offensive concepts that created openings. We saw the defensive foundation that can suffocate opponents. We saw individual players rise beyond circumstance. And the moment this team decides to stack those things instead of wasting them, everything changes. So if you're a fan watching this right now, sitting there torn between frustration and belief, you're not wrong to feel either one. This season has earned both emotions, but nothing is finalized yet. Nothing is written in permanent ink. And the craziest part is this. If the Eagles win the next one, and then the next one, and then they walk into Buffalo and refuse to back down, this entire year flips. Every ugly moment turns into fuel. Every criticism becomes motivation. Every mistake becomes part of a story about a team that refused to fold when it easily could have. And continuing from that exact moment, because the truth is this stretch of the season is going to determine not only how far the Eagles go, but what kind of team they truly are when everything is on the line. When you're sitting at this point in December, every snap becomes a test of character, every drive becomes a statement, and every game becomes a referendum on whether you still belong in the conversation or whether the league has passed you by. And right now, the Eagles are standing in the middle of that storm with a choice to make. What gives this team a fighting chance is that the foundation, despite all the frustration, is still stronger than people realize. The defensive front is playing with a level of urgency we haven't seen in months. Jordan Davis looks like a force who finally understands he can control a game from the interior, and that's not something you can manufacture. It's something that happens when a player embraces the moment and decides to lead. Jix Hunt continues to evolve into the kind of edge presence who makes offensive tackles uncomfortable from the opening snap. Cooper DeJean is showing he can be trusted against top receivers in high-stress situations. These aren't flukes. These are indicators of a unit discovering who it is and who it can be when the pressure is highest. The offense, on the other hand, is the side that needs to match that same energy. We've seen glimpses, true, legitimate glimpses, of what this group can look like when the plan aligns with the personnel. When the run game sets the tone. When Saquon Barkley's vision and burst create balance. When Jalen Hurts uses anticipation instead of hesitation. When the spacing in the passing game gives Devonta Smith room to operate. When the play calling doesn't panic at the first sign of resistance. But glimpses don't win games, they just tease potential. And now it's time to convert potential into production. What has to change isn't complicated. It's commitment. Commitment to balance. Commitment to concepts that work. Commitment to protecting the quarterback with rhythm instead of asking him to drop back 40 times behind an offensive line held together by tape and adrenaline. Commitment to letting players play fast instead of thinking their way through every snap. And most importantly, commitment to stopping the snowball effect that has derailed so many games this year. One turnover cannot become 5. One mistake cannot become a meltdown. One stalled drive cannot become an identity crisis. Because despite everything, despite the standings, despite the mistakes, despite the inconsistency, the opportunity is still there. The door is still open, not wide, but open enough for a team with pride to fight its way through. Beat the Raiders and momentum shifts. Beat Washington and belief returns. Go into Buffalo and fight toe-to-toe with a heavyweight, and suddenly the league is forced to pay attention again. The playoffs don't care how you got in. They don't care how messy it looked. They only care about who you were when you arrive. And if the Eagles finally align their talent with their execution, this is still a team nobody wants to see in January. Picking up right from that point, because if we're being honest, this is exactly where seasons like this become either cautionary tales or defining turning points. Nothing about this Eagles team has been easy, clean, or predictable, but that doesn't mean the story is already written. In fact, what makes this moment so compelling is that everything still feels unsettled. Every flaw is obvious, every frustration has been aired, and yet the core pieces of a legitimate playoff caliber team are still sitting right there on the field. It's not blind optimism, it's recognizing that talent and potential haven't disappeared. They've just been buried under inconsistency, hesitation, and a lack of cohesion that keeps derailing games before they can take shape. But what stands out right now is the emotional undercurrent running through the locker room. You can sense these players are tired of talking about what went wrong. They're tired of hearing about the losing streak. They're tired of being questioned. And sometimes, that's exactly what pulls the team together, not through speeches, but through shared frustration that finally boils over into urgency. And you felt that in the Chargers game. You saw guys fighting on every snap, even when the turnovers piled up, even when the momentum swung the wrong way, even when everything screamed collapse. That's not a team that's checked out. That's a team searching for the spark that flips everything. And believe it or not, you can build from that. You can build from Jordan Davis having the best game of his career when the team needed him most. You can build from Jix Hunt's relentlessness finally producing big-time plays again. You can build from Cooper DeJean proving he can lock down a talented receiver in space. You can build from the offensive concepts that actually worked, the ones that created openings, rhythm, and movement before the turnovers short-circuited everything. You can build from Jalen Hurts delivering an elite throw in overtime even after one of the toughest games of his life. Those things matter. They matter because they're signs of life in a season that could have easily spiraled into apathy. Now the question becomes, does this coaching staff have the courage to lean into what's finally showing promise? Because the blueprint is right there on tape. Lean into the ground game when it's working. Don't abandon Saquon Barkley after one electric touchdown. Stop forcing Jalen Hurts into volume passing scripts he has never won with. Protect the offensive line by using pace and rhythm instead of slow developing plays that collapse before they can begin. Keep the defense aggressive and confident. Put the young standouts in positions to succeed instead of overcomplicating their assignments. There's no mystery here. There's no need for wholesale reinvention. The Eagles don't need a miracle. They need commitment, clarity, and execution. They need to stack good possessions, then good quarters, then good halves, and finally good games. And if they do that, suddenly everything we've been saying shifts from what went wrong to what's finally working. Because